Hi guys, welcome to the second video for Chapter 5. In this video we're going to take a look specifically at adaptations for survival in terms of heat, okay, and how organisms survive in the heat like in desert environments. Okay, let's jump into it. Okay, the desert environment. So, when we talk about adaptations to heat, we need to look at the environment that the organism lives in. In this particular chapter, we're going to look specifically at adaptations for organisms in Australia. However, the general features can be generalized according to other deserts and other areas of heat as well. Majority of Australian ecosystems are actually desert. Here is a map of the different types of vegetation around Australia, and you can sort of see the majority of it sits in the middle in Western Australia, South Australia, Northern Territory, and Queensland, and parts of New South Wales as being kind of your arid desert conditions, and then you've got your semi-arid grassland areas, and then you've got your rainforests up the top, and then you've got your temperate forest down the bottom. Okay. Temperatures are fairly high, and in the summer there's often no freestanding water for long periods of time, up to decades. And in order to survive in the desert ecosystem, plants and animals have to have these specific adaptations that avoid dehydration. So you can imagine what some of the challenges being: intensity of sunlight, heat stress, water desiccation, and so forth, and lack of nutrients, right, as being some of the key challenges that organisms face when in the desert. And the adaptations must therefore counter those issues that it faces. Okay, so we're going to take a look at a few examples to sort of bring out some of these things. Now, it's not imperative that you remember names of everything, but it is very useful for you to know the names of the organisms with these particular features because they help you understand. Yeah, we're going to start with reducing water loss. This is the crest-tailed mulgara. Now, it is a rodent or a marsupial rodent, actually, living in around about the central Australian desert, and it's got a variety of features that allows it to reduce the amount of water loss it faces. Yeah. So, for example, water loss in feces. It's prevented by sucking up that extra water from its feces, having an extra large intestine, allowing it to excrete dry feces. Water loss in urine. It adapts by producing highly concentrated urine, right? Water loss from exhaled air, prevented by exhaling air that is cooler than what they have inhaled. Yeah? By making it cooler, it retains the water moisture within the air a lot more. Okay, from the skin, reducing the number of sweat glands, and then being nocturnal is both a structural adaptation, not having a lot of sweat glands, and a behavioral adaptations by being nocturnal. It prevents any water from kind of evaporating from the skin. Water loss from body heat. The crest-tailed mulgara has fat deposits in its tail that prevent insulation around the vital organs. That way it keeps the body cool for longer, but it still has a reserve of fat that it needs. And then water loss through the milk for the young can be prevented by having young when water is available. So in other words, when it does need to feed the young with milk, it only does it during a season where water is available readily. Okay. The table also leaves a little blank space for you guys to go ahead and consider which ones are structural, behavioral, and physiological adaptations. And you're going to keep going back to that. Yeah, keep thinking about which feature is a structural feature, which ones is a physiological, and which one is a behavioral feature. Okay. Other ways of reducing water loss: the spinifex hopping mouse, otherwise known as the takawara, can also have a variety of different methods that allows it to reduce the amount of water loss. Yeah. So a few examples of this: their kidney tubules, in particular their loop of Henle. If you did the excretory system, you will sort of have a somewhat familiarity. The loop of Henle is in charge of reabsorbing water back into the body. For the spinifex hopping mouse, the kidney tubules, the loop of Henle, is extremely long, which means it is able to continually reabsorb more water from its urine and basically almost producing a solid waste. Okay, the hopping mouse also places seeds in deep burrows, and by putting the seeds in these cool chambers or these burrows, what the seeds do is the seed actually collects moisture from the air and gains water. And so when the mice eat the seeds, they also consume the water that is being extracted from the air, and it goes into the mice's body. right? It also has the ability to gain water from plants, insects, and metabolic water at a higher rate than what you and I are able to produce, right? It's also smaller, which means it's very effective or reduces the amount of energy it requires to survive. And so the water in versus water out ratio is really well balanced so that it doesn't lose too much water through all of its kind of main pathways, okay? Other ways of reducing water loss, sometimes a structural or a physiological adaptations might not really work. So dormancy is a really good behavior adaptation, and the trilling frog is an example of that. Frogs typically live in moist environments because their skin is moist. It needs it needs to be in a fairly humid environment where there is a lot of water moisture in the air to survive, because if it gets too dry, too much water escapes or evaporates through the skin, and the frog literally kind of dies drying out. It can't prevent water loss through the skin the way you and I can, the way that lizards and other animals can. But the trilling frog can adapt by tunneling under dried up water, and then it undergoes this state of dormancy. Basically, it shuts its body down for a period of time, and then it only kind of emerges out of its dormancy during the seasons where it starts to rain and the environment becomes moist again, right? The trilling frog also can then create this kind of mucus layer around its body to prevent it from losing too much water as well. So that mucus actually allows it to create this shell around it while it's dormant, right? And also, if you're getting really desperate, another behavior adaptation is just to leave the area. Yeah, budgerigars are an example of a bird species, because most birds, can fly. If conditions get harsh in a location, you simply have to move to a different location. So moving around is also a form of adaptation that birds will do. Migrations are kind of typical seasonal or periodic movements of birds to find environments that are suitable for them. Yeah, so when a budgerigar lives in a fairly arid or semi-arid environment and it gets really dry, it will simply fly to another location where it is a little more favorable, more food, more water available, cooler parts of the day to find this shelter, water, and food. Okay. And if it gets really desperate, sometimes organisms have a remarkable ability where they sacrifice themselves for the sake of their young. For you and I, we kind of view survival as being a bit of an individualistic point of view. We think that survival is survival in terms of us. However, for many species, survival is primarily concerning the survival of the species itself. So, you might have kept some of these things before. We call them sea monkeys, but they're actually brine shrimp. Yeah, brine shrimp are a type of shrimp that live in a water environment. But with the brine shrimp, what happens is the species, they can't survive without water, but the eggs can. Yeah, the eggs are drought resistant, which means they don't dry up. Yeah, the shrimp create these drought resistant eggs, and what happens is they lay their eggs during seasons of rain, and they go through their entire life cycle. And then when the rain disappears and it dries up, the entire species or population dies, but you've got these eggs that are drought resistant, and they can survive for about 20 years. And then when it rains, the eggs will then hatch, the offspring will develop, mature, and reproduce all before the water dries up. And then you have this kind of more eggs that are sort of laying dormant again for the next however many long period of time. That's why, when you buy the sea monkeys, you add a bit of water to it, and they seemingly come alive because they actually start to hatch. Until you realize you've been feeding them absolutely nothing, and then they eventually die of starvation before they can go through their life cycle and produce more eggs. But it used to be a bit of a toy, and then they kind of realized that it's a bit cruel to just have these sea monkeys inside of a little package that you can just put water into. Yeah. So that's adaptations in the desert. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'll catch you guys